Okay, so let's talk about alternate ranking systems. Typically, when you've gone to the My Stats page, this is what you see, right? It's the distribution of all the teams for a given metric. You can go back and forth between them. You can switch league versus conference. You can do raw versus adjusted. You can look at a table versus the chart. And this is all based on that opponent adjustment, right? So how good they are relative to the league average. We adjust your performance against that team based on that amount. And this has sort of been the standard, the default for everybody. Um, got some feedback from a bunch of programs that this is a good baseline, but not always the best way to think about things. And so I've come up with a essentially a different set of uh, algorithms that you can use as your default ranking. So the no weighting is essentially what we've always had. This is the raw versus adjusted. It's the idea that we're going to just look at every game weighted equally. We're just going to adjust and give you extra credit for playing good teams or dent your performance if you played bad teams. There's two new algorithms, right? So the first one is basically saying, okay, we don't necessarily need to look at every possession equally. We want to weight your numbers against teams that are very strong. And so the way that this works is basically um, stats accrued against the worst team in the country only affect your rating and your ranking 1% of the amount that a game against the best team in the country would. So the games that you played against the best teams have the biggest impact on your ranking. And that's applied to every team. So where the no weighting is basically, okay, every possession counts and we adjust by opponent. This applies to every team and says that let's weight every team's games against the best teams higher so that essentially the games against weaker teams are not taken out of the ranking, but they're less important. So that's the strong opponent weighting. The ignore weaker opponents is essentially if you play a game against a team that's lower than the median in terms of Black CeeLo rank, so the bottom half of the country, those games are just completely ignored, right? So the stats accrued in those games won't affect your ranking at all. And so obviously these are the two the differences. You can think of it in terms of do we want to uh, only focus on games against really strong teams? That's who we measure ourselves against. We use the other games for experimentation. We don't care what happens in those games statistically because we are not going to lose them. They're not competitive. You might gravitate towards the weaker opponents. Whereas a strong opponent is more about, hey, all games matter, but we want to make sure that the way we evaluate and judge ourselves is geared towards the games against the strong teams, the teams we need to beat to achieve our goals. Um, and so you'll see this little beaker icon. Anywhere you see that, you'll know that the ranking is based on one of these three, whichever one you've chosen. Some of the metrics like the performance trends, the game by game stuff, that's all just the original all possessions count equally. But the three on the stats page that are adjusted, so the time-based profile, if you've selected this strong opponent weighting, then essentially, everybody's used to this page where it says, okay, our shooting percentage in the first 20 seconds of the shot clock is 30-ish%. This basically says, okay, we're going to weight games against strong opponents higher so that we can have a better sense of what our numbers look like in the games that are really competitive for us or games that we play against better teams. So some programs have said that this would be a better way to think about the stats. And so now we've got that option. You'll notice that the counts are gone because there's, since we're weighting games differently, there's not the same concept of this game had 10 shots, this game had 5 shots in a given bucket. And so I just took those counts out because I thought they'd be confusing. But we still have the ability to look at the percentages. And again, these are weighted percentages. So they're going to count your games against strong opponents much more than the games against weak opponents. But all these three are all now based on the algorithm that you've chosen. To actually choose the algorithm is pretty straightforward. So the first time you come to this page, you'll see this screen. And it basically says, hey, no stats are shown because we need to have you make your selection. And so there's two questions. It's really around how important is every possession? Do you really value that consistency, or do we recognize that some games we want to have some games be weighted less? So we'll just kind of click through these. Secondary question. Again, this is just sort of philosophical questions that whatever is right for you, you can choose. Key point, right? So you can always go back and change them as we saw before, right? So it's not like a final choice. Just pick which one you think is best, and then you'll be able to go and change back. So you click through the questions, hit save, and now we've got our ranking, right? So you can always click this, explain these choices, gives you kind of the full breakdown of how it works, when you might choose one or the other. You can always ask me a question, or there's also an article that I wrote up kind of with some deeper explanation that might be helpful. I've also got this video, which I'll post so that you can see exactly kind of the day-to-day. Like I said, you can change it at any time. If we want to kind of go back to what we had before in the opponent adjustments, we would just pick that no weighting. You can toggle between the metrics, right? So if you want to say, hey, okay, I'm going to go and look at one versus the other, you can just do that. If you want to change the default, you can either do it here or just click the pin, and that'll make it the default for the next time that you load the page. And so that's sort of the broad summary. Just wanted to get a video out there so that it wasn't just, hey, here's a new feature, good luck. If there's any questions, definitely let me know, and I can answer them and help you figure out which one makes sense for you.